Hey and welcome. This is going to be a relatively quick video. This is mostly for people who are currently out of the loop regarding the scandal surrounding KZ and their earphones. So there's currently a lot of IEMs that are yet to be confirmed to have fake or otherwise decorative, effectively drivers in them. This here is two of them that have been talked about heavily recently, and they're two of the, I would argue, most common and popular models from KZ. So starting on the one on the left, we've got the original KZ DQ6. It is supposedly a three-driver dynamic non-hybrid. It's just a multi-driver system. The idea was that it has a single 10 millimeter dual magnetic dynamic driver handling the bass and mids frequencies, and then the treble and upper mids were supposed to be handled by two tweeters, two 6 millimeter regular dynamic drivers. Now, in the marketing material, they are found, see right here. This is the 10 millimeter XUN full range driver. And you can just kind of see through the warped plastic here and the poor lighting that there are in fact two 6 millimeter drivers. So on first blush, rather, you would think that this is, everything is in order. The drivers are all in there. When you crack it open from the top, there, you can see that everything is all wired up. The main dynamic driver is wired up. It goes directly to here. And then you've got a tiny little crossover somewhere with two resistors on it, or a resistor and a capacitor. And it leads into, I believe it was this one. And then this one feeds this one. So these two share the same frequencies, which is a little redundant. But maybe they had a reason for it, you'd think. Well, so all seems in order until you think about one of these things just from the beginning. This driver is not run through a crossover. That bass driver, it runs directly to the input, which means that tweeters or not, it's been wired from the factory to do everything, which makes those tweeters redundant, unless in this case, this is a trick. These are wired. These do produce sound, but you will not hear them. And because of that, they need this to produce all of the sound. So what's happened is, if you flip it over on the underside here, it's hard to see. These two drivers have a little chamber that runs just underneath them for the sound to travel. And there's a little tube that pops up here, right in the center. Now, short of ripping this thing open further, which is incredibly difficult because you have to break the seam that runs along this edge down here, and popping out this driver, you won't really be able to see it. It's right down in here. Basically, that tiny little tube that runs from those drivers is blocked by the sidewall of this driver, as well as copious amounts of adhesive. Ultimately, what ends up happening is none of the sound will travel from these back drivers. You will only hear the sound from this front driver. And that means that all along, these two have been doing essentially nothing. You can unplug this one right here, and you will hear nothing. You might hear the faintest hiss. Doesn't work. So, again, I think that maybe why KZ did this, aside from just being cheeky assholes, is that they did it because they don't want to have to go through the effort to tune and design crossovers for a proper three-way speaker system to fit inside of an IEM, and at a low price point at that. Alternatively, it's possible that KZ is just incompetent and they don't know how, but they want the marketing clout. So what can they do? Well, in this case here, they haven't lied. Not technically speaking, they haven't lied about the fact that there's three drivers in here and they're all producing sound. They're all wired up. So from that perspective, it looks on paper legally like they're all good. So they're scamming you, but they're doing it in a way that says, well, we're only kind of jumping around it. Fuck off. This is a slightly different, but a very similar case. So this is the KZ CRN. This is the, or otherwise known as the ZEX Pro. And it is the collaboration between Critical and KZ. As you can see the MST driver on the bottom side here. You can kind of make out the XUN dynamic bass driver there. And depending on where you look, just make out that 30095 BA from either Belsing or KZ. Pretty sure it's one and the same. So, now if we crack this open, take this little bicycle seat looking thing off. Pardon me. Now, we can see the inside of the KZ ZEX Pro or KZX CRN. So, unlike the DQ6, they don't have a, pardon me, they don't have a wad of glue stopping the sound from coming through. In fact, the drivers are all wired in there correctly sorry, I shouldn't say they're wired in correctly because that's actually where the problem comes from. They are installed correctly. There is a clear channel for the audio to pass through. There is a little gap that runs between the EST driver and the dynamic driver, and just down in the back here, hidden under all this spaghetti wire mess, that BA driver is plugged into an open cavity that runs between the two of them. And then it runs through a little nozzle, a little pipe here to take all the sound. It's hard to see through the plastic, but I've had another unit open and this plastic was out of the way. And then it just channels through there. So now, looking in here, if you have ever seen a ZEX Pro inside before, you might be noticing the lack of a crossover board in here. And the reason being is that the crossover is actually what's responsible for the fiasco on this one. So like the KZ DQ6 and DQ6S, the XUN driver, the supposed bass driver, is actually wired directly into the main input. It has no resistance across the PCB. It's just a straight shot in. It receives the entire frequency range. So everything you hear is being reproduced by that speaker. So right from point one, that kind of defeats the purpose of having a crossover and other drivers in there. The idea is to take the load off of the DD so that the DD can focus on doing its bass, and then you got the magnetostat doing the mids, and then you got that 30095 tweeter, ultra high tweeter BA handling the treble and the airiness and stuff. But no, so immediately the fact that the DD is doing that is a bad sign. And then normally the EST driver and the BA driver are wired up backwards in terms of polarity. So their positives are wired up negative. I don't know if there's a reason for that, but either it's incompetence or it's intentional. Now, on top of that, the resistance values are, I believe, somewhere in the ballpark of 26 to 36 ohms between those two. Whereas, again, the impedance for the pathway from input to DD is 0. And effectively, what that means is that if you unplug the DD, the XUN dual magnetic driver, and you plug in these IEMs, which I've done, I've experimented with this, and you plug them in, you will hear sound. It is damn near inaudible. I use a Sound Blaster X G6. It's capable of powering on high gain mode 600 ohm headphones. It's a fairly beefy DAC amp combination, lots of little features and such. Well, I had to drive this up to 60% to actually hear a reasonable amount of sound coming out of those two drivers. And it was thin, it was wispy, it was hardly noticeable, and It didn't sound right at all. And I was very disappointed to find that. So in this case, it's like the DQ6 in that they installed it, they make noise, and then they did something to it to make it so that under average listening conditions, you will not hear the sound. And when I say these things were up to 60% volume on a Sound Blaster XG6 on high gain, that volume would most likely completely blow out the DD if it was plugged in. So unless you can manage to withstand listening to audio that loud, you're not going to hear those other two drivers normally. So in this case here, unlike the DQ6, which unfortunately I actually broke the other unit, trying to remove the glue and modify the shell to allow the sound to pass through because I wanted to know what it would sound like with all three drivers running. Well, in this case, you can actually make all three drivers run. So what you do is you basically just lift out all this wiring, all the little gutsies. You don't have to worry about removing the drivers themselves. Now you'll notice I've got a couple of wires here. Not only am I missing the crossover because I've completely removed it because it did nothing. All it did was send input to the DD, which I can do myself, thank you. And I also, I wanted to be able to wire up everything else directly to the same source. And you know what? When you wire that up directly, the BA and the EST, they work. The EST is capable of upper bass in that range, and then the full mid-range, and it can do treble. And the BA is loud and clear, loud and proud. You listen at normal volumes, you'll hear that shit going. So you don't need the DD in this system. It doesn't sound right. It sounds very light on bass. So ideally, all three would be working. Now, the reason why I've got a couple unplugged here is because I'm actually currently playing around since I don't have a proper crossover and I don't have the tools or the skills on hand to design a crossover that would be effective. Currently, I'm experimenting with enabling 2 drivers at a time. So I tried all 3. It's very interesting. It's kind of a bit of a noise fest because there's kind of a lot going on, not a lot of synergy between the drivers. But I figured, well, if I run the DD alone would present me with the KZ CRN default tune. Then if I wire in the BA, but not the electrostatic driver, that might give me back some of that sparkle I've been missing on the upper end and that weird treble dip. I'm hoping maybe that could help alleviate that. It might introduce a little more sibilance, but I'm okay with that if it means that the treble hasn't been scooped out like a tub of ice cream. So there's some opportunity with this. It's still extremely dishonest though. At the end of the day, the reason why I'm showing people this crap is well, it's because I don't want people buying this. They can sound good right out of the box, both the DQ6 and the KZ CRN. You may have loved them before you found out about this. You might love it afterwards. You might look at this and go, well, I'm fine with that. The reason I encourage you not to go ahead and buy that is because you should not give your money and your support to a company for products that are essentially fraud. Because by definition of fraud, they have promised to deliver you one thing, you received another. They promised you, in the case of the CRN, a tribrid. They promised you that you would be buying these to hear a dynamic driver, a balanced armature, and a magnetostatic driver working in symphony to produce the frequency range at the target that they specified. That's what they're selling you on. They push it in the marketing. You can't say it's not important. The whole thing about, oh, more drivers isn't necessarily better. It doesn't matter. This is what they marketed. You didn't get it. Now, with the KZ DQ6 and DQ6S, again, they don't buy this. You're not getting what you paid for. When you buy this, you may as well just chop this right off at the fin, because this isn't a DQ6S. This is a DQ2. There's one dynamic driver per side. The other two are there for show. They're there to fucking fool you into wanting to buy it because, wow, look, KZ managed to put three speakers into one earpiece. I bet that has a pretty unique and cool sound. Sure, that one DD sounds good, but it's a lie. It's a false advertising, and they're preying on people, and they are running here with the knowledge that most people don't open up their IEMs to check the drivers, at least up to this point. I think they've opened up a new can of worms at this point. Now, for me personally, I take morality really seriously. And for me, it's very frustrating and infuriating and enraging, actually, to see companies treat us like shit, to treat us like we're stupid. KZ, you're not going to get away with this shit in the future. People are going to be opening up every single one of your non-single dynamic driver IEMs going forward, and they're going to be finding every single time you send us a ball of fucking lies wrapped in marketing nonsense. So there you have it. That's what's going on. That's why it's happening. And do I recommend that you get them? I mean, no. No, I don't recommend it. And yeah, do with that what you will.